I'm 17, and until last week, I had never believed the rumors about Crestwood High. They say strange things happen when you're alone in the building after dark. I used to laugh it off like everyone else, but now I can't stop seeing it. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. It all started when I was assigned detention last Tuesday. Mr. Daniels, the biology teacher, made me stay late after school to clean the lab. Just an hour, he had said, but I didn't finish until almost 8 p.m. The halls were empty. The usual chatter and footsteps replaced by a heavy silence that clung to the air like a thick fog. The janitor, old Mr. Howell, had warned me earlier about staying too late. He always seemed a little off, rambling about things he'd seen when he was the last one here. But I shrugged it off. Superstitions. I wasn't a kid anymore. But I should have listened. As I walked down the main hall, something felt wrong. I heard a faint sound like a girl giggling. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. There were no other students left in the building. The sound echoed, getting louder as I approached the stairwell that led to the old gym, the one that's been closed off for years. "Who's there?" I called, but my voice came out shaky. No answer. Curiosity got the better of me, and I took a few steps down the dimly lit stairs. The giggling stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing down on me from all sides. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the bottom of the stairs. The gym door was slightly ajar, despite it being locked for as long as I could remember. I nudged it open, the hinges creaking. Inside, the air was cold, unnaturally cold for a building with no open windows. And then I saw her. In the center of the gym stood a girl, no older than me, in an old-fashioned school uniform, her back to me. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders in tangled waves. She was barefoot, her feet pale against the dirty gym floor. Something about her felt wrong. I took a step forward, my breath catching in my throat. She turned slowly to face me, and that's when I saw her eyes, empty, hollow, staring straight through me. Her mouth twisted into a wide, unnatural grin, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too jagged. My stomach dropped. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a stray basketball, sending it bouncing across the floor. The girl's head snapped toward the sound, her neck cracking unnaturally. She let out a low, guttural laugh that reverberated through the gym. I ran. I didn't look back. The next morning, Crestwood High was just the same as it always was, but I knew better now. Something in that school was watching, waiting for anyone foolish enough to be there after dark. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to forget that grin. Parker High was as ordinary as any other high school in the city until you heard the rumors about Room 13. Officially, there was no Room 13 on any school map. It wasn't part of the blueprints, and no one had seen a class scheduled in there. But people whispered about it. They talked about how strange things happened near that part of the building. The sounds, the shadows, the stories of students who went looking for the room and came back changed. If they came back at all. I'm Alex, a senior at Parker High, and I didn't believe any of it. Ghost stories were for little kids. But after hearing my younger brother's friends talking about Room 13 like it was some cursed place, I got curious, stupidly curious. And that curiosity led me to what would be the most terrifying night of my life. It started when my friend Ben and I decided to explore the abandoned part of the school. The one that had been sealed off after a wing of the building was damaged in a fire years ago. The place had always been off limits, but after hours, no one was around to stop us. I figured if we could find Room 13, we'd prove the rumors were just that rumors. We didn't expect to find it, or what was inside. Heading into the old wing was easier than I thought. The security cameras had been down for years, and the padlocked door had a loose hinge. So we pried it open with a crowbar I'd swiped from my dad's garage. Immediately, we were hit by a blast of cold, stale air. It smelled damp, like mold and rot, and the hallway beyond was pitch black, the only light coming from the flicker of our phones. Ben hesitated. "You sure about this?" "Yeah, man. It's just an old room. Don't be a wimp." We stepped inside. The air was colder than it should have been for an October night, and every step echoed unnaturally, the sound bouncing off the crumbling walls. The deeper we went, the more oppressive it became, like the building itself was closing in on us. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, longer than it should have been. And then, there it was, room 13. The number was barely visible on the door, its brass numbers corroded and almost falling off. The door was different from the others. It looked older, more worn, like it had seen things that the rest of the school hadn't. A shiver ran down my spine, but I shook it off. I grabbed the handle and twisted. It felt cold, too cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. The door creaked open, and that's when I noticed the first thing that wasn't right. There was a faint noise coming from inside the room, like a low hum or distant whispering. I couldn't quite make it out, but it set my teeth on edge. We stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. It wasn't a regular classroom. The walls were lined with old filing cabinets, some of which had been torn open, their contents scattered across the floor. Desks were overturned, chairs broken, and there was this faint, almost sweet smell in the air like decaying fruit. But what made my stomach churn was the writing on the walls. It was everywhere along, jagged scratches carved into the paint, spelling out words that made no sense. "Let me out. Help me. It's here." Over and over, the same phrases, like someone had written them in a frenzy, desperate to escape. Then we heard it. A shuffle from the far corner. Ben froze, his eyes wide with fear. I followed his gaze, and my breath caught in my throat. At first, it looked like a pile of old clothes crumpled in the corner, but then I saw it move. The figure, no, the person stood up slowly, their joints cracking with the effort, as though they hadn't moved in years. It was a boy, no older than us, his skin grayish and stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were wide, unfocused, staring right through us, and his lips were cracked, mumbling something under his breath. I took a step back, but the door behind us slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. The boy, or whatever he was, began moving toward us, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, his neck twitching with each step. Ben backed into the chalkboard, his breathing fast and shallow. "Alex, what the hell is this?" The boy's mumbling grew louder, and for the first time, I could make out the words. "You shouldn't have come." Then the lights went out, pitch black. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. My heart raced, panic clawing at my throat. I heard Ben gasping for breath somewhere beside me, and the sound of those shuffling footsteps coming closer. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in. Suddenly, the light flickered back on for just a second, and I saw it. The boy's face was inches from mine, his eyes hollow, empty sockets, dripping with something dark. His mouth twisted into a grin, jagged teeth yellow and broken, his breath reeking of decay. I stumbled back, knocking over a desk, and the lights went out again. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight, and shined it around the room. Empty. The boy was gone. But the whispers. They were still there, growing louder, more urgent, like hundreds of voices overlapping, speaking over each other, all saying the same thing: "Get out. Get out." I grabbed Ben's arm, yanking him toward the door. "We need to leave, now." The door was locked, but I threw myself against it, over and over, until finally it flew open with a sickening crack. We tumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. The cold was gone, replaced by a suffocating heat. The walls seemed to pulse, the paint bubbling and peeling before our eyes. We didn't stop running until we reached the exit, bursting through the doors into the cool night air. But even then, I could still hear it. The scratching, faint but constant, coming from the walls, the floors, the very ground beneath us. Room 13 wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and whatever was in there, it wanted out. Megan had always been good at reading people. She knew who belonged at Maplewood High and who didn't. That's why Peter stood out from the moment he arrived. He was quiet, never spoke to anyone, and appeared in classes at odd times, but no one seemed to care much. Except Megan. He was strange, almost like he didn't know how to be a teenager. He'd sit alone at lunch, always in the back corner, watching. The teachers never called on him, and no one knew which homeroom he belonged to. Even more unnerving, he didn't seem to have a locker. Every time Megan passed by him, she felt the hair on her arms stand up, an instinctual warning that something wasn't right. One Friday after school, Megan stayed late to work on a project for her science class. The hallways were deserted, the rain pounding against the windows. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She packed up her things and slung her backpack over her shoulder, ready to head home. As she made her way toward the exit, she felt that familiar chill. Peter was standing at the end of the hallway, watching her. Megan's heart skipped a beat. There was no one else around, just the two of them in the dimly lit corridor. She kept walking, pretending not to notice him, but her pace quickened. Her mind raced with questions. What is he still doing here? When she was almost at the door, Peter moved, stepping into her path. "Hey," he said, his voice low and unnatural. "Leaving late, huh?" Megan swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yeah, just finished up some work." Peter stared at her, his hood pulled low over his face, but she could see the edge of a twisted smile forming on his lips. "Need a ride home?" Megan's stomach turned. She tried to sidestep him, but he moved again, blocking her. "No, thanks. My ride's already waiting." He didn't budge. His hand reached out and lightly grabbed her arm. "I can give you a ride. It's not safe for a girl like you to be out alone." Megan's instinct screamed at her to run. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, she yanked her arm free and bolted down the hallway. She could hear his footsteps pounding behind her, growing faster. The hallway seemed endless, the exit too far away. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she darted into the nearest classroom, slamming the door behind her. She pressed her back against the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her phone was in her hand, but her fingers trembled too much to dial. She frantically texted her friend Kara, "Help, something's wrong. Library hallway." Peter banged on the door, his voice now calm, eerily soothing. "Megan, come on. I was just trying to help. Let's talk." The door handle jiggled. "Megan," Peter called again, his voice growing more agitated. "Open the door, now." Megan's phone buzzed. "Kara, what do you mean?" She texted back quickly. "There's a guy pretending to be a student. He tried to grab me. Call security." Another bang echoed through the room as Peter tried the door again, more forcefully this time. Megan could hear the wood creaking. She held her breath, her pulse racing. He wouldn't stop. He was going to get in. She dialed 911, her voice barely a whisper as she explained her situation to the dispatcher. "There's a man in the school. He's not a student. He's trying to get me." The dispatcher assured her help was on the way, but time felt like it was stretching, every second too long. Peter continued to pound on the door, his voice now low and menacing. "You can't hide forever, Megan." Suddenly, the pounding stopped. Silence filled the air, thick and unsettling. Megan strained to listen, her heart still racing. Was he gone? Minutes ticked by, and just as she thought it might be safe, she heard the faintest creak. The sound of footsteps. He's still out there. Then, In the distance, she heard the hurried footsteps of security guards approaching. There were muffled voices and a scuffle outside. Relief washed over her, and she unlocked the door slowly, peeking out. A security guard stood there, out of breath. "Are you okay?" "He's gone. We've searched the area." Megan's legs felt weak as she stepped out into the hallway, trying to make sense of what just happened. "Who was he?" she asked. The guard frowned. "That's the thing. We don't know. He doesn't have any records in the school system, no ID, no enrollment papers. He's not a student." As they walked her to the office, Megan's mind raced. She realized Peter wasn't just an ordinary creep. He had planned this. He had been watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And if she hadn't acted quickly, she might have never left that school. But the most unsettling part came the next morning. As she checked her phone, Megan saw a notification from an unknown number. "I'll see you soon."